So, welcome to Jessie Ginsburg and Chris Wenger. Thank you so much for joining us today.
We're excited to be here.
Yes, we are very excited to be here. We're going to bring the energy today.
We need it. I mean, come on, this is good. It's wake up time.
That's what I'm talking about.
This is kind of a first for us here because we have had two people interviewing on the podcast before, but never the SLP couple. So this is kind of a cool new thing. So I'm excited to learn more about you both. And okay, so we have so much we want to get into today because you both are a wealth of knowledge and you hold so much information that the rest of us want and need and could benefit from. But just before we get started, I just always love to know what brought you here. How did you get here professionally in your current roles?
You go first.
Oh, gosh. I am going to condense this story down a little bit. I grew up with a family of educators, so that was kind of the initial start. My entire childhood was me going down with my dad after school to work with some of the students that he did for after school sports. I became a coach when I was in high school as an assistant coach for him because he taught sports. I just had a passion for working in education, and that solely came from my parents. I got into teaching special education prior to being a speech pathologist for high school students. So I jumped right into learning about how to write IEPs, and that really helped me as I transitioned into the role of being a speech pathologist, because I was already familiar with how to write an entire IEP. So from the get-go, it was just a great journey. And I'm glad I took that step forward because I just love what I do. So that's kind of a condensed version of how I got here.
Yeah, and mine's the complete opposite because I never thought I would go into education, and I wanted to go into medical field. I wanted to be a doctor. And then I went through about half of college pre-med, and my biology professor made me cry because I told her I don't like chemistry. And she said, well, if you don't like chemistry, you're never going to want to go to med school. And it's crazy how one conversation with one person pushing you away from something actually does, I mean, that's sad, but it's also fortunate because then I went looking into this speech pathology, which was really popular at my college, and ended up going into that field. But isn't that funny? You have to be careful what you say to kids. They actually listen to you.
That's right. It's the way we frame things to them. It either guides them in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Jessie, it guided her down this path, because if it didn't, then I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, and we both ended up on the California State Board for SLPs and audiologists. So there's 10 board members, and we both really fell into the board. I did not think I was going to end up on the board. He didn't think so either. And then that's how we met, was because we were two of the 10 board members, and here we are. Now we've got a nice blended family, our baby who just turned 1,
and we've been teaching him some strategies for the future so that way he could become an SLP. Even though he's 15 months, we've been like working with him on what neurodiversity-affirming means and things like that, so he could be prepared for the future.
It's never too early. I mean, honestly, it's never too early to start that. But this is always one of my favorite questions because I just think it's always so interesting how people came into this field. And I feel like there's no two stories that are alike. But you are so right, Jessie. And I think it's such an important reminder because I'm thinking how I became an SLP is a teacher stopped me one day after class and said, hey, I think you would be great at this. You should consider it. And I was like, what the heck is that? So you're right. It's like you never know what you're saying to somebody. It's a good reminder to use our words carefully.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, now that you say that, it reminds me of, I was this one-on-one aide for a little 7-year-old autistic girl when I was in grad school. And her dad said to me, when I stopped working with her, he was like, I know you're going to do big things. I could see you owning a clinic one day, just like the one that she goes to. And I think that was what planted the idea to me of even having my own clinic, which I do now. And then, Chris is in the schools. So we've got that difference in setting between the two of us too.
Absolutely. I think that's huge too. Like working in the schools, I have been really mindful of like the language I use and really try to take that additional step forward when I see a teacher do a great job in an IEP meeting. I follow it up by saying, hey, you know what? I don't know if you hear this often, but when you're in those IEP meetings, you're really great with talking to the parents. Or if I see a special ed teacher, I will share that like, hey, you know what? I don't know if you hear this often, but I just want to let you know, like, you're accommodating all of the students, and that's just awesome, man. And, that really sets a nice positive tone, and it encourages others to want to continue doing the right thing. So, yeah, it's the
Yes,
words we use.
absolutely. And I've recently learned too that with kids, it's giving that specific feedback where just like you did with those teachers, like you did a great job doing this specifically versus, hey, good job today. It's like, wow, that really does I feel like it goes a long way. So I'm really happy that you do that because I'm sure you definitely changed their day by saying those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's like that. Jessie and I talk about that a lot. It's when we, with our own kids, but with our clients and our students, if somebody comes and says, hey, guess what? I got an A on my English paper, rather than saying, you're so smart, it's one of those things where we say, you must have put a lot of time in studying for that. And you know what? Your efforts on studying and focusing on that thing really has paid off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so you both are really experts in a couple of different areas that I think are we're just becoming much more aware of. And I wish that I had you around when I was working with students in schools, but the areas of sensory integration and regulation. And I love that these are becoming just much more part of a vocabulary as speech pathologists. But what led you to your interest in those areas? How did you get started in really embracing and becoming the experts that you are in those areas?
Yeah, so my first job ever, I was an SLP assistant. This was before I went to grad school, and I worked with my first ever autistic client. He was 3, and he was one of those kids who would just run into the clinic and run in and out of every single therapy room. Everyone knew him in the clinic because he was like that kid who would just come in to go through your toy cabinet. And
I'm visualizing this. I'm visualizing this child as you're saying. Yes, I know this child.
Sweetest kid ever, like great family, but it's a huge challenge for me. I just felt week after week, like, what am I doing with this kid? I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not helping him. Someone else must be a better therapist for him, and that was a multidisciplinary clinic. So I worked with a lot of OTs and we got to do co-treats, and I started learning more about sensory strategies and how I could actually use sensory strategies to calm kids or to, get them more alert if they needed to be. So for him, I really started playing around with different strategies. And when I started incorporating a lot more movement into our sessions, he, started using words and he was so engaged, and it was just like a completely different shift in what our therapy had looked like. So that was really just like getting my toes wet. I mean, is that the phrase, feet?
Yeah, feet, toes.
I'm like known
ankles.
for messing up everything.
I like it all.
We know what you mean.
Wet.
So yeah, I was just getting my toesies a little wet. But I actually wrote my essay when I was applying for grad school on integrating sensory into sessions, which is funny because I did that then, but then I kind of like forgot about it. A few years passed and then it just came back around to me. But that was really what planted the seed for me about how much of a difference it could make when our kids are regulated in our sessions, because not only, do sensory strategies help us to get kids regulated, help to get them in a place where they are able to learn more effectively, but it's fun, you know, and getting our kids having fun, engaging, being motivated is one of the best things that we can do for them.
And you make progress. I mean, then it's also, that's where you start to see those gains.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris? How did you get into this realm?
Gosh, I have learned a ton from Jessie. My area and line of setting is a lot different than the private practice. So working in the schools, it has become one of those things of supporting teams and really getting the ideas of sensory differences and working with identifying those differences and not seeing when things are just targeted as behaviors. So that became like a resounding theme, was getting called into meetings. And then in the meeting, it was like, okay, well, we need to set this kid up on a behavior plan, for example. And it's like, okay, have we looked at any of the sensory needs? Like, what's going on here? I can tell you that in every single class in America, those fluorescent lights, it's not even about the fluorescent lights. It's a little buzz that goes on.
Yes.
It just creates this uncomfortable feeling, not just for me, but for the kids that we work with. And I mean, it's just like looking at the student and saying, what are the sensory differences and how can we support their needs? What kind of accommodations can we provide? Rather than looking at it as, something that needs a behavior plan or trying to suppress that type of sensory need. That is really the big dynamic between a traditional pathology approach versus a neurodiversity approach, is looking at sensory needs and saying, how can we support with accommodations? What are the needs? Versus sensory tolerance, because I've seen that a lot sometimes in IEP goals or behavior plans, which is, well, the kid's sensitive to light, so what we're going to do is put them in an environment where there's a lot of light so he can tolerate it. It's like, no, it is not what we want to do. We do not want to extinguish these types of things, because that's going to have all of these little behaviors start peeping their head up more. It's like playing whack-a-mole. We've talked about that, where you try and get rid of one sensory thing that's going on in the schools, but if you try to extinguish it, you get rid of that one and there's like three more that pop up. It's like, no. So that's really been a big mission for both Jessie and I, is really how can we, especially for within the schools, how can we support those needs? What kind of accommodations are needed? And so, yeah, that's kind of been my journey.
Well, and it really is, I mean, it's fascinating how far we've come, but yet, like you said, we still have a ways to go. But it is, I mean, the traditional classroom where kids are spending so much of their time, they really historically have not been set up to support this. So it's almost like setting these kids up. Of course, they're going to have behaviors, because it's, sitting still in a hard chair with the fluorescent lights and having to listen. And, it's just a lot. And so I feel like I'm seeing some positive things and changes happen in our school system, which I think is great, but definitely a ways to go. And I'm curious, so when you're explaining like sensory integration and regulation to a parent or another educator, how do you explain it?
So I have a couple things I do. One, I really like to make up analogies. They usually come out of nowhere.
She's the best at this.
I have so many analogies I use. But I think one of the biggest things when you're talking to other people is really framing it in a way where they can truly understand what it means, So I like to give parents examples of what that might look like for them, So like if their child has a noise sensitivity, and they cover their ears when the toilet flushes, I might say to the parent, imagine if the sound of the toilet flushing sounded like you were standing in the back of an airplane, behind an airplane as it's taking off. So for kids who have that hypersensitivity to different sensory inputs, it's not that they are just reacting bigger, it's that they're feeling this input with greater intensity. So we actually recently, we have a weekly live show that we do called Making the Shift, and we just interviewed 2 different autistic friends and colleagues the last 2 weeks. And I don't know if you realize this, they both said the same thing, which was they used to tell people that loud noises hurt them. And people would say to them, no, no, that's just loud. So they grew up with this language of not being able to describe what that was like for them because they were being invalidated. No, that's not, it doesn't hurt. It's just loud. It's just loud. But it really hurt them because that's how big of, great of an intensity these sounds that might be everyday sounds for other people felt to them. So I think being able to describe that to parents is so helpful. Another one might be like, imagine you spent like 12 hours at Disneyland. You know how much you want to just get home and turn off the lights, turn on the TV, get a glass of wine. Like, imagine that feeling, you having that feeling every time you step foot inside of a classroom. Your kid is feeling really overwhelmed, really overstimulated, but they're not able to have that time to turn off the lights and kick up their feet. They're just going, going, going. So trying to come up with ways that they can relate to it, I think really helps.
Yeah, and then of
absolutely.
course,
She has this other analogy about the eggs in the basket one that I love too.
Oh, I was going to say the seesaw.
Or the
That's probably
seesaw.
more relevant.
This is there's the sensory analogies by Jessie Ginsburg. If you just go on Amazon, no, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, a really simple analogy I use is for parents and professionals is imagine a child's sensory processing as a seesaw. And when the seesaw is balanced, that means the child is regulated. I call that their optimal learning zone, meaning their brain is in the best position for learning. They are learning at the most efficient way possible when their seesaw is balanced. And then if you think about a tipped seesaw, that represents a dysregulated child. And they're not in their optimal learning zone. They are dysregulated. So I think what happens so often in our therapy is we see signs of dysregulation and we see the seesaw starting to tip, little more, and we just keep going in our therapy. We keep asking the questions, we keep on with whatever we're trying to do, but all that does is further dysregulate the child, tips the seesaw even more. When in reality, what we really need to do when we see those signs of dysregulation is focus on getting that seesaw back to center, because that is the only way we are going to get the most out of the child, and the child's going to get the most out of the session. They have to be in that optimal learning zone.
yeah, and I mean honestly, you're so right. If it's almost like they're not available to learn unless they're, because it's like I can't shut out the noise of the other things that are happening. So of course I'm not going to be able to focus on what somebody's saying to me or following a direction. So yeah, that's a great way.
Yeah, I mean,
And
this
do you
is
feel like, Chris?
neurology, this is research
Yeah,
based. This is not just like us making assumptions. That's how it works in the brain is when we are dysregulated, we are not able to access those parts of our brain responsible for logic and
yeah,
problem solving and creativity. So it's really important for us to be able to get kids back to that place where they can access those parts of their brain.
And
yeah,
in
and
the
that's a
high
great
school,
way.
so I work with high school students. And
Yeah,
that transitions into the importance of when the students start to feel that their bodies are changing, like energy levels. If they start to feel like a sensory difference or whatnot, being able to advocate for support. So, for example, if the teacher has prepared a celebration for a birthday party in class, because that is pretty common, and the student knows that there's going to be really loud sounds, there's going to be cheering and clapping or whatnot, the student identifies that, advocates to the teacher by saying, is there any possibility I could wear my earplugs, or would you mind if I step out of the classroom for a couple minutes, or would you mind if I run over to the office during this time because I have some sound sensitivities? And that is really an important thing for our students who become adults. This is like a lifelong need that we can help support them with.
Yeah, and what we're hearing more and more from autistic adults is how often those needs are not being met and how often they are being invalidated for their sensory differences. And, there's tons of surveys that show that autistic adults, up to 95% of autistic adults report they have sensory differences. And the way that we help is not by, like Chris said earlier, trying to increase their tolerance to it. it's by respecting that as being part of them and being able to accommodate them. So that's such a huge link between how this relates to what we actually do as SLPs, right? Because we have to be able to teach kids what they need and then how to get it, how to communicate those needs.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I love that you say that because this is who they are. This is their makeup. This is their DNA makeup. So you're right. They need these strategies so that they know how to communicate this, advocate for themselves, whether they're in a job or just in life, in social situations. And I'm curious, Chris, at what age in the schools do you start having these conversations with the students as far as giving them the language and helping them to understand what may be happening and how to communicate that? Do you feel like there's like a prime age, or is it the sooner the better?
Yeah,
I mean, I was going to say, I work with younger kids. He works with, high schoolers. We have these conversations with kids at like 4.
Yeah.
It just depends on their level of understanding. But I think that's one of the things is that so few therapists are having these conversations with kids when they're young, and then they're getting to high school and they don't know anything like about this. He's actually the first to introduce it to your kids a lot of the times.
And part of that is honestly, like on a large scale, it depends on what lens you look through it from. And so the way that the IEP is set up and the way that the diagnostic criteria is set up is with the idea of looking at it being a disorder and trying to fix it. The problem with that is it's not affirming the person or who they are. So by trying to fix a sensory need, all it's doing is creating stress, anxiety, depression. It's not helping the kids out. And so the lens has to be looked at as, hey, this individual has a sensory difference, and what can we do to support those needs? What can we do to put into the IEP, the accommodations? And circling back to your question is, regarding the age, just what Jessie said is, when can we start teaching these kids? Because the younger that we do that, the better off they are learning these things over the years. And each individual is different. So it kind of just is the I in IEP, right? Individualized. So
but wouldn't you say, like, have you, any of your kids you've worked with, have any of them had this knowledge before you've worked with them?
No. They haven't had the knowledge. And the reason is because they've had previous therapy approaches or previous goals or previous things that looked at it as, hey, you know what? This kid's stemming, he's hand flapping. What we need to do is suppress that. What we need to do is tell him to keep his hands quiet, tell him to keep his body quiet, tell him to keep his body in the group. All of these things, which ends up increasing more difficulties for the child. So that's when they get to the high school, it's because historically, if we're viewing it from that type of lens of trying to fix it, then, but yeah, to answer Jessie's question, it's exactly the reason why. Is because of the approach. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make a shift.
Yes. And it's so, I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking of some goals, it's been 10 plus years ago, but just we'll make eye contact, we'll keep body quiet. It's just like, oh gosh, you just, when you know better, you do better. And so, but it's just, yeah, I'm so glad that this awareness is getting out there, because I'm also thinking, if they don't know that, oh, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, this is why I get it, then imagine how bad that feels inside. It's almost like, well, something's wrong with me. I'm broken. Instead of saying, no, you're not. You're great the way you are. And these are just some techniques and things that you're going to have to use to do, have a better experience in society, but you don't need to change a lot of these things that you're doing.
Right. That's such an important thing. I think the big concept there is to remind ourselves of the goal isn't to try to make someone less autistic. That's got to be something that we take out of our school of thought, right? And so that's kind of where the big shift is at. I have been doing this for 2 decades now, and so I used to write goals like that too. And what I've learned is that part of that at the beginning stages of learning new things is that feeling of guilt or shame of like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. At the same time, we all operate at a conscious level of doing what we at the time feel is best for our students. We're not out trying to harm people. It's just at the time we wrote those goals because we thought that was what was best. Now, the important thing is if we're learning about what's new and transitioning into different goals that are affirming people's brain differences, then there's nothing to be ashamed about in the past. We just have to know that if we have that knowledge, we have to continue doing what's right for our kids. That's the important thing.
And even like you talk about the goals we write and we have these conversations, we joke that this is our pillow talk because this is all we talk about all day. Like it's like 9 o'clock at night and he's like, hey, what do you think about this goal I just wrote? And I'm like, can a girl watch some Real Housewives around here?
That's
like,
true.
do we need to be working? But it's such a, you know, like you talk about, it's such a huge mountain to climb because it's not just how do we change our approach, it's how do we change our assessment, right? Because our assessment dictates the goals we write, which dictates the approach we use. So that's something that Chris has really been working on with his new informal assessment he created was, and it's, gosh, I want to say it's like the only neurodiversity affirming assessment that looks at these areas of, you know, is the child self-advocating? What are the child's needs and accommodations? But what happens is that when we go into an assessment looking at the deficits, then that creates goals that are trying to fix those deficits, which creates approaches that are trying to target those goals. So it's like a cycle that needs to be changed.
Yeah, and for your listeners, that's the thing really in the IEP. The most important page in the IEP, it's a 13-page document. The most important page is the present levels of performance. That is ubiquitous across all the states, right? In the IEPs, that's the foundation of where are we at with the student. If that page doesn't have accurate information or if we're focusing on deficits, then what ends up happening is the present levels of performance page drives the services and goals. So you can't just say, hey, I'm going to write some neurodiversity affirming goals or some strength-based goals without having accurate present levels of performance. So it really truly comes down to the assessment, not the evaluation with standardized tests, but the assessment where we're looking at real-time data with students in class. We talk to their teachers. We get information from the caregivers and parents. We get information from the students themselves. We have them self-report. This is truly how we can help our kids. But that's the thing right now is that if we're not getting that present levels correct or with accurate data, then we're not getting accurate services. We're not, how do you know how to help the student with OT, PT, vision therapy, or all of those things, or with goals, if from the start the present levels are off? So yeah, I'm really a huge advocate for that.
If you can't tell.
Well, it's important, and you're right. I mean, I've seen so many just goals that just get repeated year after year. It's like, why are we doing this? Like, why are you working on this?
And there's the law. I think that there's this idea that we can write neurodiversity affirming goals without having the present levels or the assessment. The problem with that is that some of these high profile cases, we work in the school systems. We have IDEA law to follow. And if you go into a meeting and they say, hey, these are 2 neurodiversity affirming goals, but I would need the data to back it, you're going to be sitting in front of the administrative law judge trying to defend something that you're going to say, well, I got it off a goal bank online, or I got these goals. They're like, no, you have to have the data to back it. And so this is why it's so critical. And that was one of my missions, to say, hey, you know what? I got to come up with a way to get something that is legally defensible in a neurodiversity affirming way so we could collect that data that's fair for the families, the students, and not only that, but you walk into the IEP meeting as an SLP feeling confident, like, hey, I feel like I'm making a change.
And this is why he comes to me at 9 p.m. because it's always on his mind.
He's like, I can't stop thinking about this.
Breakfast.
Hey, This is a sign that you went to the right path. You are where you need to be. That's got to be a good feeling because there's a lot of people that aren't where they need to be, and you are there. We'll be right back to our interview. We just want to take a brief moment to shout out the company that makes this show possible, Med Travelers. If you are a therapist interested in traveling, visit medtravelers.com to explore the amazing benefits that Med Travelers has to offer. Featuring short and long-term contract opportunities at leading facilities across the country with higher earning potential, W-2 employee status, and a flexible schedule, Med Travelers is your advocate for career success. Visit medtravelers.com to begin your travel adventure today. And now back to the show. But I want to ask about the assessment process. And so with this informal assessment, it sounds like you are getting just a plethora of very crucial information that really just paints the picture of present levels, who they are, what they're doing. But do you ever run into problems of them saying, anyone at school saying, well, we need a standardized assessment, we need a standardized score? And if so, how do you handle that?
Okay, excellent question. Because a couple things that can be addressed, which is that neurodivergent individuals have a brain differences. So our autistic kids that we work with have a brain difference. All standardized tests, every single one of them that are criterion referenced standardized assessments are normed on non-autistic students. Right there, you're already setting the kids up for inaccurate data because you're testing them on a different neurotype. So I don't care if you administer the Wixler, Woodcock. Well, Woodcock Johnson's a different one, but the Castle, the Cell 5, you name it. These are all normed on non-autistic kids, so you're not going to get fair data. Second, when I'm going to do an analogy. It comes from Jessie's book of analogies. Like, think when we go to a job interview and we really want the job, we already know that we're being judged and assessed in that interview. And we're so nervous. We have anxiety. All of these things come up. When the kid goes in for these standardized tests, they know they're being evaluated. That's problem number two is they go in with so much anxiety and they're being tested by someone they don't know, in a room that they haven't been in, and they know they're being evaluated, which is going to create some report that their mom or dad are going to have to go into this meeting for and talk about. All of those things are not giving us data in real time. And not only that, what if the kid didn't sleep the night before because they were playing Fortnite until 3 a.m.? It's like you've got so many variables that are not going to give you the data that you need. And I'm going to tell you this, if you get information from standardized test and then that becomes your goal, then what ends up happening is a couple years go by and then the parents, they start to think, man, we've been working on these goals and they're kind of similar. I just don't know why my child has not established a friendship, right? They're like, we had this goal 3 years ago, or I just don't know why my kid's not getting abstract language, or I don't know why they're not maintaining topics, you're maintaining the topic. Whatever it is, it's like all of these goals that we're writing based on standardized assessments are not supporting our students in the right way. So I really do share these in meetings. I say, I just want to, and I actually will call the parent in advance. I'll say, we have our 3-year eligibility review. Your child's still going to qualify for speech services, but I would like to collect data from you, from the teachers, I would like to get information from your son or daughter. And I really would like to, get some information that we can really make fair and solid goals to really help them, live a happy life, meet their educational needs, meet their goals for beyond the school system, which is employability, independent living, all of those types of things. And
so you're talking about getting permission from parents to do the assessment differently. I think that's what she's asking. It's like, what can you do instead?
And so, legally, when it comes to the public school system, especially post-pandemic, You are not required. I think there's this misconception that it's required to have standardized testing done every 3 years, and legally you do not have to do that. You do have to talk to the parent in advance. You have to let them know, hey, we're going to use other measures. Maybe it's rating scales, questionnaires, feedback forms, input from a variety of people, observations. But standardized testing right now, we already know that they're eligible for special education. We already know that they qualify for some sensory and social needs. And so with your permission, is it okay if we hold off on the standardized test, because all that's going to do is create anxiety and not give us accurate results. And I think there's a better way that we can do it. And the parents, I never get any kind of pushback on that, because parents want their kids to succeed. Parents want their kids to be happy. Parents want their kids to live a good life. It's just a matter of how we have that discussion.
Yeah, and I think that is a common misconception, that because I've heard that, well, we have to have standardized scores. And it's like, but it's not appropriate. So, and I love that you have this. Is the assessment that you utilize, is it specifically for neurodiverse students, or do you use it for other students as well?
So it's nice because it's you can modify it. So all of the forms are easily modifiable, and they can be used across a variety of students. I've had a lot of feedback where someone says, I had initially used this with my autistic students, and then I started using it for my other language students. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? This is good for my entire caseload, because I'm getting information from the parents, teachers, and the student as well, of stuff that really helps drive my therapy approach. And yeah, it's really easy because it collects information, and it's an easy to read dashboard. So as the months or years move along, you could reflect back on it and see the progress, or see how things have made changes. But yeah, but the initial creation of it was for our neurodivergent students.
And what's been really cool is that it's called the Dynamic Assessment of Social Emotional Learning. But what's really cool is that when he first designed it, and was just like trying it out and working on it, he had this idea that it was mainly going to be for, older students. And then we started playing around with it, and I started using it in my clinic with younger students, like 7, 8, 9, I mean, sometimes even younger. And it was just such a game changer for me, because it opened up conversations with these kids that I would have never otherwise had. And like Chris said, one of the components of the assessment is the student forms. The student gets to have so much input. And it was really cool for me to be able to have these conversations with like 7-year-old kids about, where do they feel like they need support? What do they feel like their strengths are? What are they looking for in a friendship? That's a really big part of it. So it's been really cool to see it kind of change and grow.
And this is a hot topic that Jessie and I have talked about a lot, which is intrinsic motivation. Like when she's here with her clients in her practice, when I'm with my students or whatever it is, it's building on that autonomy, but also building on that, what intrinsically drives people, what makes people and kids and students and clients go, I'm looking forward to going and working on my goals. I'm looking forward to this therapy session, versus, oh my God, I have to go to speech. I don't want to go to speech. It's really that foundational piece for all of us. That's what drives humans, right? And that's a big thing that for Jessie and I.
People want to have say in what they're doing. They want autonomy.
Yeah.
So want to be seen and
dinner
heard.
tonight, I was thinking maybe I can have, no, I'm just kidding. I want to have say.
Speaking of, I was going to say, well, and so a couple of follow-up questions. So one is, I'd love an example of a neurodiversity affirming goal that you would write on an IEP. Like, what would that look like? And then also, I'd love to know what sort of sensory strategies have you found to be effective to increase some of that motivation? And I know that may be different depending on the student or child. So, okay, neurodiversity affirming goal, and then some strategies.
So this is just
motivation.
a general example, but one thing that would be really easy. You know, we know that traditional social skills goals aren't neurodiversity affirming. Usually what they're doing is just teaching kids to hide their autism, try to act like neurotypical kids. So a lot of goals would be like staying on topic or talking about a non-preferred topic for X amount of minutes. Like Chris will talk about a recap of The Bachelor for 5 minutes while asking 3 follow-up
It's
questions.
definitely a non-preferred topic.
So one of the
I was going to say, I'm impressed.
yeah, his accuracy is still really low on that one. I'm measuring it. We'll see if we can get it higher.
I'm getting better.
But, you know, a really easy change to make is just by changing that goal to a self-advocacy goal. So it can be that the child will self-advocate when, you know, they want to change a topic, when they aren't clear about what's happening in the conversation, in navigating a communication breakdown. So it can still be a conversational goal, but you're adding a self-advocacy component so that they have the freedom to say, hey, I don't want to talk about The Bachelor right now. Like they're not being forced to do something. So that's maybe an example.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even going back to that story of if a student has sensory needs for loud sounds, the goal can be something like student will self-advocate for sensory supports by asking the teacher if they can step outside for 5 minutes, or by seeking out one of 3 accommodations that are written in the IEP, as measured by, you know, a 4-stage rubric. And that would be something that would be helpful for everybody. But yeah, definitely a neurodiversity affirming way to go about it.
Yeah, and to answer your question about sensory strategies to use, you know, it's so individualized, but something that I love to do is have conversations with kids. We go through what all the different sensory systems are. We talk about things they like or don't like. You know, we talk about the tactile system, touch processing. Well, do they like really light touch? Do they like deep touch? Do they like Play-Doh? Do they like playing with sand? Do they prefer when people don't hug them? And just starting to have those conversations with them about what feels good and what does not feel good to their body so that they can learn those things and then be able to eventually advocate for them. So, you know, in a more like black and white concrete way, we essentially are teaching them, here are some things we can do to calm ourselves down when we need it. And then here are some things we can do to alert ourselves, you know, when we feel like we're about to fall asleep in class and we need to wake our body up, here are some things we can do. So helping kids to really understand that, you know, there are different ways they can use sensory inputs to help them regulate.
And do you think it's also important to start to recognize, like, let's say you're mid-session doing something, are there certain things that you can see or like, oh, okay, I know we need to now do something to help regulate them if they're not communicating that? Do you have a trained eye?
I wish I could say it's always that I could always spot the signs. But the more therapists I teach, you know, I have a sensory program. We've trained now hundreds of therapists across the world, and there are still kids that they will see who they're like, I can't figure out what the trigger is. And it's like their seesaw just tips all the way so instantly. And I think something that we don't often consider is emotional regulation, which plays just as much of an important role in it. Because a lot of these things we might see, you know, we might see a behavior, you know, quote, behavior, and assume it's sensory related, but it might actually be some kind of emotional reaction that's just manifesting in a physical way. So like if a child is maybe like chewing on their shirt, we might think, oh, he needs the sensory input, which may be true, but it might be because he is so emotionally dysregulated. So, yeah, I think there are some kids where you can see the signs, But another thing you can do to prevent those sudden changes is learn how to modify the environment. So there's using sensory strategies, but there's also how can we change the environment so that it's more comfortable for this child so that they're less likely to have their seesaw tip. And it's like Chris was talking about those fluorescent lights, like changing out the lighting, stuff like that can make a huge difference.
Yeah. And how does that, Chris, is that hard to modify the environment in the school setting, or do you have a space that is your room been allowed to, how do you do that in the school?
Yeah, that could be a little bit challenging because so many classes and so many things that can pop up. So it's a matter of working with what types of accommodations that the student can use in the class without like having to completely modify the classroom. In a perfect world, it's like, hey, let's go in and change all the lightings, or fluorescent lights, but it doesn't work that way. So
I was imagining you taking all the light bulbs out.
Even like in high school, you send your kids to go take a walk, which is something that you can do.
We have a sensory room on our campus as well. The sensory room's nice because it has a variety of fidgets. It has a little Stairmaster. We have a little recumbent bike to really help kids get out that energy. We have a lot of things where a student can go there to really regulate their system, which is really nice. And we have a lot of supportive staff as well. So we have one individual on campus that really works with a variety of students on how to co-regulate. So she's like the go-to person if somebody has some moments where they need to talk to somebody, where they need to work things out. She's just a great
You visit
support.
her a lot, don't you?
I'm there every morning. After waking up and having 3 kids under the age of 6, I'm like, I need to co-regulate.
She's like, Chris, it's been nice, but I have students I need to actually work with today, so I'm going to need you to.
Yeah, she's like, Chris,
I'm going to need you to go get on the recumbent bike.
You've taken up 6 of those 8 hours.
You have your own IEP, perhaps. We all probably could in some way,
No,
right?
my gosh, it's exactly true. I need some of these reports. They're so long in these IEP meetings. I'm like, can you guys please give me some visuals and give it to me in advance?
Yeah, so like, you need your own IEP for accommodations to sit through IEP meetings.
I've been doing this for 20 years. Like sometimes I'll have like a different type of therapy person chime into the meeting, and they're like going over words I've never heard of. I'm like, if I've never heard of these words, how is the parent going to understand what this jargon is? I need you to speak to me in English.
Yeah. No, I have been some of those too, where you're like,
yeah, it's like, well, that was a word I've never heard of.
Yeah. And I'm curious, Jessie, do you ever use, or do you think this is another strategy, is just asking the student, child, what's going on in your body right now? Like, tell me, like, so if you can kind of sense maybe something's not 100% with them, there's something a little bit off, but you don't know what it is. So maybe, like, would that be a strategy, is like maybe a newer therapist or somebody to just ask them, what's going on? Tell me what's happening.
Yeah, I think depending on the child and their age and their level of understanding, but we use, there's an organization called Autism Level Up. It's an autistic-led organization. They have a lot of free resources. One of the things they have is an energy meter. So, what the autistic community is trying to move away from is the feelings meters. Because
the faces.
Yeah. A lot of autistic kids and adults have trouble identifying what these emotions are in their body. So instead focusing on the bodily sensations and then what they can do to help themselves. So sometimes just a visual of that meter to help them really think about like where they are and then what they need from there.
There's like the irony of that too. When I see some of those like emotional meters, is that because I see that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm at the very top of that thing just because you're using it.
Enraged.
I'm enraged that you're using this emotion meter.
Yeah, those are, I'm just having so many moments that you're exactly right, Chris. So we just have to give ourselves grace. Like, better, you do better. But it's like, the goals, like they will look at faces and identify appropriate emotions. And it's like, is that really the most functional goal? Probably not. So,
That's the other thing too. If you think about it, when sometimes those things are enlarged into posters, and you'll see it in some of the classrooms, and it's like, well, when you point to that thing and say, "You're right up here, Johnny," how does Johnny feel around his peers? And is that going to make Johnny feel connected with the teacher, or is it just more on a compliance-based model? Because that's going to take away from learning. That's going to take away from intrinsically wanting to be in the class. And it just does a lot more harm than it does good by even having that visual thing in class. It's like, you follow my rules right here. You're right here on this. So I'm going to let your classmates know. It's like, no, you can't do that.
do you want to be this one or this
Right.
one? Follow my rules, you'll be this one. It's like, okay.
Right.
It's,
Exactly.
it's so silly when you think about it. Well, I know, gosh, I feel like the amount of knowledge the two of you have, we could never even begin to just like, we're just dipping our toe in, right? Jessie, we're dipping our toe into a little bit of all the information and knowledge both of you have. So I know you have so many awesome courses and resources and things that are available for people. What would you recommend? How do people get started if they want to learn more with you all? What, do you have something specific if it's somebody that's like a new grad versus someone who's been doing this for a while? What are your recommendations for getting started if people want to learn more from you all?
I think, first of all, this isn't from us, but one of the best things that we've ever done and continue to do is we put a lot of time into reading, posts, blogs, stories, podcasts by autistic people. And that's the best place you can go to learn. No questions. Start following some autistic accounts on Instagram, and it's like you could read one post and it will change your entire practice for the rest of your life, right? Like I could pinpoint certain posts where that's been the case.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, that's really where the most valuable information and a good starting point is going to come from. Yeah. Hearing from autistic people themselves. They do such a great job of like providing insight, providing perspectives, providing things that can be helpful. And I agree.
It's so cool because they've been through the years of therapy, and now we have social media, which is amazing because now it's like we get to hear these stories. We get to hear what worked, what didn't work, what they need more of, and then we can change our approaches. But, like you said, we're just dipping our toe in the water, which is exactly how we felt when we were starting to learn all this, which is why we started our weekly live show, Making the Shift. So people can find us there. We're on YouTube every week, and then that gets put on Apple Podcasts after as well.
Yeah.
And that's for Making the Shift, correct?
Making the Shift, revolutionary methods for autistic kids.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, then we're on social media as well.
You both have a lot of great information on your Instagram, and I love that suggestion. It's like, you're right. I just was one of those moments when you said that, like, oh my gosh, of course, like you're going to the source. Like if only everything in our life was that easy to, I shouldn't say it's easy, but just you have information from the people we're working with. It's like right there. So you're right to take advantage of that and learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love sending our families to do consults with autistic professionals too, which is really cool.
That was a great idea. And then I know, Chris, you mentioned the assessment, and that's, do you say DASL?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. Because I know that's on, and can that be accessed through your website as well?
Yeah, so at speechdude.com, a great starting point is that I have a free masterclass on there that really talks about, there's 9 different tips shared on there of what it takes to really support our learners. And and then at the very end of that masterclass too, if anyone's interested in wanting to take the next step, there's a discount code there if they would like it. But honestly, the masterclass just gives a lot of
value. The class is on Neurodiversity-Affirming assessment though, right?
Right. The class is on Neurodiversity-Affirming assessments and what we can do to help our students. Mm-hmm. Right there on speechdude.com.
Yeah. And we'll put all those links in with the show notes because I think it's there's so many awesome resources. And I'm always so impressed with this SLP community. It's like people are so, that come, are experts and have these resources and courses. And it's just, I feel like it's a very generous field with like, I want to share what I know. So we've got, I think, okay, just for my own mind to kind of keep myself organized, we're going to, so following autistic adults on any social media is a great first step. Speechdude.com and the masterclass, and then even the assessment, the DASL, those kind of go hand in hand, it sounds like. And then Jessie, you have some great resources as well.
Yeah, so we have a sensory certificate program for SLPs, and that is for SLPs who really want to be able to learn all about sensory and how they can assess kids' sensory needs and then be able to utilize those strategies in therapy. But for SLPs who just want to learn a little more, we do free classes almost every month on sensory and SLPs. So they can find me on Instagram, jessieginsburg.slp, and we're always posting about our free classes too.
Yeah, so we'll put all that information in the notes. And I really love what you all are doing, because it's just, you really are changing. It's probably not quick as we all want, but really, I mean, just to hear your ideas and philosophy and what you're doing, I mean, it really is what a cool impact. And hopefully then, there's not 5 years from now where people are going, oh, those goals. I mean, I'm sure there still will be some, but maybe not to the extent where it's like, now we know and can really better treat these individuals and respect them for who they are, instead of, you need to be something different. So I really do love your message and what you're doing.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think we were working one-on-one ourselves, still do with kids, but we realized that we could really spread messages way faster by being able to work directly with therapists too, so that because every day is precious, in these kids' lives. Like one day learning something new can make a complete difference in their life. So that's really the goal of what we've been trying to do, is help people to help their kids build positive self-concept and fulfilling lives.
It shows. Okay, so last question. What's next professionally? Where can we, what can we expect? Because I know your free time.
Okay. I mean, so I have this summer that I'm working on a course that will be something to help our autistic students learn about autism, learn about who they are. And I'm going to have several autistic guests, and it's just going to be a thing so they can accept who they are. They can learn about strategies and ways that will really help propel them for the future. And so that's going to be coming in the fall.
That's what you get when you get your summers off. You get to do fun projects over the summer.
That's right. But guess what? Working in the schools, I think people think it's summer vacation for me. I'm like, I had to take some of my money from each of those 9 months of getting paid and put it into a separate account. It's not vacation. I'm still paying for this.
It's true. It's definitely, there's a lot of misinformation out there about the summers.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not on vacation, you guys. I had to take a 9-month pay and spread it over 12 months. So I'm just barely getting a tank of gas.
Well, I know it's true. So what about for you, Jessie?
Yeah, actually, that reminds me, we just wrapped on filming. It's called Autism Support Resources for Teams, which is a resource for parents and professionals who want to start implementing more neurodiversity-affirming practices. So just describing all of these steps and what they can do. And we have different autistic contributors. It's really exciting. And yeah, we just not too long ago got back. We were speaking in Australia, and then we're working together more and more.
Cool.
So hopefully we'll continue to do that. We have some other speaking things we're going to be doing together this summer too.
So fun. Well, I thank you so much for your time, your knowledge, and just your willingness to share what you've learned with everybody. So we will put all that information on how people can get connected with you in the notes. And I encourage everybody to, I mean, This is just such great information. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. We really appreciate that. We wanted to extend our thanks to you. And for your listeners out there, we really appreciate you sticking around. We hope that you have a legendary rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for tuning into SLP Full Disclosure. For more information about this episode, check out the show notes on our website at medtravelers.com/SLP Full Disclosure. And don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss a guest. Are you interested in becoming a travel SLP? Visit medtravelers.com to learn more and explore the exciting opportunities we offer at top-level facilities across the country. Also, a special thanks to Jonathan Carey for producing this episode and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. And as always, this episode was powered by Med Travelers. See you next time.